Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here of the Lonely Risk Podcast. I am your host, as always, of course, Blake Ray. And today's guest is somebody who I have met recently, a new friend. And he is blending purpose, design, and a whole lot of heart into the world of watches. Sitting down with us today is Trip Henderson. And Trip is the founder of Lōcī, which is a watch brand that's all about celebrating connection between people and places. And it seems to be that this is just not about great quality timepieces because Trip is on a mission to protect environments and communities that inspire his designs. And 10% of every sale goes towards preserving those endangered places for future generations. And from disaster relief to stargazing in the middle of the Atlantic, and it comes back to one big idea that places matter. So let's get into it. And please welcome the man behind Lōcī, Mr. Trip Henderson.
Thanks, Blake. That was one of the best introductions I've had. I appreciate all those kind words, and it feels like you've got the brand nailed down already. So if you're looking for some side work as a brand rep, I think you're hired.
You gave me a lot to work with on your about page. So thank you for that. So sometimes it's the exact opposite. I'm having to use like archive.org, and it seems like I'm having to do a background check on people to even get information. So yeah, I think, you've obviously got some mojo going. There's not too many brands that are based in LA and California. Not to mention doing assembly in California. But let's start with Lōcī. How did this project begin? Where did it start for you? And we'll start there.
I mean, you alluded to some of the roots of where the brand started. It's not a short story, but the point of it is that the entire brand revolves around its mission, which is to protect endangered places and environments. And the watches are really a vehicle for that. The watches are a way for the brand, but more importantly for the people who buy and wear the watches to have a positive impact in the world. I've kind of always been one of these people who wants to be part of something bigger. When I was a kid, I joined the Navy. I went through college in ROTC, went to sea a few times. I wanted to be part of something bigger. After that, I found myself living in San Francisco and working. This was kind of during the dot-com boom back in the late 90s and early 2000s when we were building things for like the first time. Like everything was a clean sheet of paper. And, I loved being involved in that. It felt again like being a part of something bigger. We were changing the way industries were working, and that was really cool. And then eventually I found my way to the nonprofit world, which also you kind of mentioned. I'll bring this all back to watches, but after a long time living in the Bay Area and working in tech and startups and media, I had the opportunity to become the first chief marketing officer for Team Rubicon, which is a nonprofit based here in LA, a global disaster relief nonprofit based here in LA. And it was founded by veterans, and most of the now 150,000 or so volunteers are veterans. And the genius idea behind that organization is that veterans turn out to be really good people for disaster relief because of the experience and the skills they picked up in the military. They are the exact right kind of people that you want to rally up as volunteers and deploy into disaster areas to help communities recover. And the way that all of that comes back to watches, you mentioned on the about page of my website, I have this, really deep-seated love and affinity for places. I've had these really moving experiences in different places. And the first one ever that I can really kind of recall and put my finger on was what you mentioned in the run up, which was, it was the very first time I'd ever gone to sea in the Navy. And I was out on the deck of the ship. I came off watch in the engine room at like midnight, and I wandered up onto the flight deck for some fresh air. And, I grew up as a kid in the suburbs of Philadelphia, right? I had never seen a night sky like what I saw when I looked up out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with, not so much as a candlelight anywhere around us for thousands of miles, right? Hundreds of miles.
Reach up and touch the stars, it seems like.
It blew my mind. You could see the Milky Way just with your naked eye, and thousands and thousands and thousands of stars all with your naked eye. And the reason that left like this impression on me, and the reason that it touched off this passion for places, is that what I found myself thinking about was, even though I guess you could say I was nowhere, I was out in the middle of the ocean, but that's a place, right? And I found myself thinking about all of the other sailors who had stood on the deck of some other ship last year or 50 years ago or hundreds of years ago and looked up at that same sky and maybe had the same experience and the same feeling that I was having, kind of just getting that sense of perspective when you see the Milky Way with your naked eye, and like,
Yeah.
kind of get a sense of who we are and what our place really is in the universe. Getting kind of philosophical here, but I tied that experience to that place, being out in the ocean there, and it lit off this kind of run for me where I developed kind of wanderlust and took every opportunity that I had to travel. Some of which came in the Navy, but when I grew up, we didn't have the means to travel. Like for me, a vacation was we went to the Jersey Shore and stayed at our cousin's house for a week or two, kind of thing. So, my eyes were opened and my mind was blown when I started to travel to other places around the country and around the world. And that became like a lifelong passion for me. It was just exploring and finding these places and connecting with them, because I think that when you go to a place, like I think places hold all of this energy, like
Totally.
all the things that have ever happened in that place, all the people that lived there, all the people that have ever just passed through there, all the people that have written books or taken pictures or sent postcards about that place. I think that all of that energy is kind of stored there, and you can experience these things if you go there and just kind of listen. Like these places have something to tell us, and it could be a great city like Paris and you're standing looking at the Arc de Triomphe, but it could be, I do a lot of outdoor stuff, backpacking and hiking and sailing and skiing. The place, could be out up in the mountains, could be, any place like that out in the desert, right? All of these places have something to offer us. But my work, tying this all together, my work with Team Rubicon taught me and showed me firsthand like how vulnerable all these places really are. So many places now are just kind of balanced on the knife edge of natural disasters. So to give you a sense of that, of how I started to wrap my head around that, in the 4 years I worked at Team Rubicon, we launched over 400 disaster response operations. So that's like over 100 a year. And sadly, it's like a growth industry. Like every year, the disasters are becoming, the storms that drive them and other events that drive them are becoming more frequent and more intense. Just in 2024, there was a $1 billion in damage disaster every 11 days on average. So I started to see firsthand, going into some of these communities the day after a flood or a hurricane or a tornado or a wildfire, started to see and learn firsthand just how vulnerable all of these places really are. So I had this love and passion for places. And now I had this really, like, seeing all these places on their best days as a tourist or as a traveler. And then I spent 4 years seeing all these places on their worst days. And it made me want, again, back to my thing of like always wanted to be somebody who's involved with something bigger, some kind of a purpose. All of that kind of got thrown into the mix with me being a marketing person and a brand builder, and someone who finally, I'll throw in watches, right? Finally, like, of course, I've been one of these guys who's loved watches my whole life, but like I don't want to say it's the least important piece of the picture, but it's the least unique, and it's maybe the least unique part of the picture of me as a brand founder. Like, sure, I love watches, but finally I figured out how to throw those three things, like passion for places, desire to be purpose driven, and love for building brands and wanting to someday build my own brand from scratch, throw all those things into the mix. And I finally kind of figured out what the formula could be for Lōcī, which building it all around places, right? So Lōcī is the Latin word for places. I actually built the brand and thought through the brand before I started designing the watches. So I went through the whole idea process of, okay, I'll name the brand Lōcī. That's the Latin word for places. I'll make every watch line will always be named for and inspired by a place. And I'll give 10% of the sales of that watch to a nonprofit that protects the place that inspired the watch, so that when you buy it and wear it, you have a direct connection to the creative inspiration for the watch, and you have a hand in helping to make sure that place is around for like our kids and grandkids. And once I figured all of that out, I said, okay, I think I have something that has a lot of legs. And one of the things I like about it is just that it's a creative, clean slate for me every time I do a new watch model and choose a new place for the inspiration. So instead of being a vintage inspired watch brand or a military inspired watch brand or something automotive, like these are all
Cliche.
kind of, I mean, it's not that they're cliche. Like I love all of those kinds of watches, but
Yeah,
they're guardrails and
I do too. Where you see a lot of the same, like the same design language, the same inspiration. Like I can't even tell you how many watches have been designed after a porthole, right? Like, but yeah. No, sorry, I had to jump in there.
No, that's okay. So, I love this idea because when I think about as a marketing person, when I think about how to build a brand, I want to build something that has legs and something that can reinvent itself. And so this idea of taking the creative inspiration from places, I'm like, okay, every time I do a new model, I choose a new place and I have a clean slate creatively to start over again and go where that place kind of wants me to go in terms of designing the watch. So I liked it for all those reasons. And those are some of the reasons why I designed the brand the way that I did. And then there's part of it too, where I just, I'm one of these people who thinks brands should do more than just sell widgets and make money. I think my favorite brands and the brands that I think matter the most and that are going to be built for the future are brands that make some kind of an impact in the world, some kind of a positive impact in the world. And not everybody has to be like, hugging trees and saving children and stuff like that. But like brands have an important role to play in the world now if they choose to. And these, I really think of it as, status symbol brands and these brands that have been around for a really long time. I see them as missed opportunities. Tiny Lōcī, just me working here in Los Angeles, is the only company in the world, the only watch brand in the whole world that donates 10% of every sale to a meaningful cause, right? So a lot of people are doing 1% for the planet, which is great. That's a lot better than nothing for the planet, right? But we're 10xing that because we're building the whole brand around that mission. And I think that a lot of brands are a little bit vague about like how much money they give and where it goes and what it's used for. Totally. A portion of the proceeds, or 2% of this, or 5% of this limited watch run of 100 watches. Like, what are you guys doing, right? Like you're multi-million and maybe billion-dollar companies. Like, get on it. Like if you're going to do something and make it more than some window dressing that you put on your brand, make it mean something. And so I think that, Lōcī is going to succeed or fail based on whether or not we find the people who care about the brand's mission. There's so many great watches out there. You were at the show in LA last week when we met, 50, 60 brands there. The watches are all great. Sure. It's like cars and motorcycles these days. They're all great.
Yeah.
So there aren't all that many watch brands who are really built, in my eyes, as a brand, that have a personality or a mission or a purpose that goes beyond the product. And so for me, Lōcī is a brand-led, a design-led effort, and the products are the thing we talk about after all of that. That was a lot. I'll zip it. Jump in.
No. I mean, I think you have like a secret sauce, right? And something that I'm starting to notice is like there's a lot of watch brands that just exist for just the reason of existing, right? Hopefully it doesn't come off as rude, but I look at like the trajectory of a watch brand. Like first of all, I look at like the people, right? Like how passionate are the people behind the brand, right? And then I look at the trajectory, like what do you hope to accomplish? I mean, I mean, you listen to my podcast, I ask that question all the time. Like, what do you hope to accomplish in your tenure at this company or XY or company? And I think about that a lot. Like, like how far are they going to be off their trail? Or will they walk their trail? And something I never really like heard of, until I started doing research about, and here I have been calling it Lōcī the whole time, so I'm so sorry. Lōcī. It's probably a common one.
Look, I'm a brand guy, and I know that you're not supposed to give brands names that are hard to pronounce or easy to mispronounce. But I knew the rules and I broke them on purpose. So that's my.
I will forget it now though because I botched it. And something I had read something about, and I had never heard anything about, but Lōcī is what is being called as an impact business. Mm-hmm. Rather than just another watch brand. So like, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but it sounds like the whole goal of existing is to give back, and is philanthropy, as opposed to just saying, hey, here's a great product. Is that it?
Yeah, the purpose of the brand is to look. It's a business. My dream, the first milepost on my dream, the first way station on my dream for this brand is for it to become successful enough that I don't have to work my other job as a marketing consultant, right? And if I can get past that, then the question is going to be, how big can it grow? And the beauty of it is, 10% of revenue is a lot. And the beauty of this is that the bigger the company gets, the more successful the brand becomes, the more impact we have. It doesn't mean, it's not just, oh, the more watches we sell, the more money I make and the company makes. It's, the more successful the brand is, the more impact we have in helping protect and preserve the places that we're trying to help take care of, the places that inspire the watches. So, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where like a brand or a company is just a vacuum designed to get money out of people's pockets, right? The brand can choose to do something more and do something better than that. And so, yeah, these are called impact brands. If we get big enough, I'd love to become like a certified B Corporation, which is just a series of like certifications and audits that you go through to become certified as a B Corp. These are companies that have a big arm of philanthropy or impact baked into their brand, not just like a sort of a side thing that they do, but it's at the core of what they do. So, some of the great impact brands that I really admire, and that, maybe I think about when I think about how to build and grow Lōcī, you think about companies like Patagonia and Cotopaxi and Tom's and Ben and Jerry's and Warby Parker, right? Every pair of glasses you buy from them, they send a pair of glasses to somebody who needs them and can't afford them, right? Like, you can build an amazing business and still find a way to make a positive impact in the world. So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I really care about. And I think that it's not really, it's always really hard for me to go on to be interviewed and talk about myself.
Yeah.
Coming out of the Navy and the nonprofit world, it's always like, you talk about the team, you talk about the mission, but the brand, it's not about me building the brand and the brand having this impact. It's the opportunity that it gives for people who want to be part of that mission to jump on board, and for them to have, a beautifully designed watch that they can wear and love and enjoy, but to know that they're doing something more than that, right? Those are our people.
Yeah. Yeah, something too that I guess, and I'm curious, is we're both creatives, right? We're both creatives. I find myself getting lost in the moment quite a lot. So, you talked about being, was it the USS Monistar? Is that
Moinister, USS Moinister? It's named
Moinister,
after,
right?
yeah.
And seeing the sky over the Atlantic, like, how did you bottle that moment? Like, I get so lost in it, and then like it seems like almost like a dream to me. Like when I'm in the most, I've traveled the world, and you know, it's almost like it seems like it was in a different lifetime. When I was in Europe and doing all this, and the Dutch Caribbean, and like, it just seems like it's been a different lifetime. So, I mean, that was a long time ago. So how did you bottle that?
I don't know if I have a clean answer to that, but I think that it's almost like for me, there's kind of like two gears spinning at the same time when I'm experiencing a place, whether it's a place I go to all the time or somewhere new. There's the one gear that's turning, that's kind of soaking it in. And like you said, you're in the moment, and taking in all the details. What does it look like? What does it smell like? Who's here? What are they doing? Am I speaking with them? What am I learning? But there's like another gear turning that's thinking about what's the impact that this place is having on me? What's it making me feel? What is it? How's it changing me? How's it inspiring me? And it doesn't happen usually until a little bit later, when I can take those two things and merge them and kind of distill it into, what I would call the spirit of that place. I'm reminded of, there's the external aspect of what's happening, what your senses are taking, and there's the internal aspect of how it's affecting you. And like, I'm a hobbyist photographer, and the thing that I love most, now I have a kid now, so 90% of my pictures are all of my daughter, but But what really sucked me into photography was not surprisingly travel photography, taking pictures of places, right? It was another way for me to connect with that. And there's a great quote by a famous French photographer called Henri Cartier-Bresson. And his quote, he was like one of the early pioneers of street photography. And he had a quote that said, when you have the camera up, he said, with the eye that is open, right, looking through the viewfinder, with the eye that is open, you're looking without, and with your eye that's closed, you're looking within. And
never heard that.
Yeah, what's that?
I never heard that.
Yeah, with the eye that's closed, the eye that's open, you're looking without, and with the eye that's closed, you're looking within. So when you're the act of taking a photograph, I think what he was saying is a lot like the way that I internalize or experience places, right? There's the eye that's open, I'm looking at it and taking in what's there. And then the eye that's closed is like, how am I internalizing? How's it affecting me? What mark is it leaving on me?
Yeah, I mean, that's deep. It's deep. Something I've always like questioned, and maybe we're going into like a philosophy like podcast at this point.
Whoa.
But and maybe you could ground me a little bit, but all these places, they have that energy, right? That energy, that aura, spirit, right? And I always think about like, once I've left that place, like, how can I get back there, even if not physically, but like mentally or emotionally, or like, how can I, bring that back to present day, and I'm sure that's another possible question, but
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I might be out of my depth on this. I do find like photographs for me, if I look at a photograph of a place that, kind of made a mark on me, left an impact on me. If I look at the photograph, it takes me there. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I got into photography, and especially kind of place-based or travel-based photography. I'm not good about keeping journals when I travel. I wish I was.
Same.
I sometimes make notes, and those are amazing, and those transport me back because I can make notes about like what I was feeling and experiencing. But I wish I was better at that. I can't claim I'm like incredibly devoted to that way of working. Yeah.
Let's do like a real world example here, right? So I'm not sure what you're wearing. I'm wearing the Pacific Coast Highway. And, obviously, full disclosure, Trip sent me this. But we had pushed the podcast back because Trip wanted me to get an experience. Obviously we had met very briefly, and I'm sure you probably saw I had my hands full. I had a lot going on at the
Very
show.
Full.
And anyways, we pushed back the podcast so I could get some time to experience, Lōcī, right? To experience the watch, to experience the brand. So I'm curious. I mean, there's a lot of design elements off the top of, just even looking at the watch. But explain your design process. I mean, for this, or even the watch you have on the wrist. I think you're wearing the same one, right? So
yeah, I'm wearing the Pacific Coast Highway. This one I call the Big Sur dial, and the one you have is the Monterey Bay dial. And there's a third dial called the Surfrider Beach dial. So the way that my camera is out of focus here. Let me see if I can get it back.
Sorry.
The way that I approach design is I choose the place that I'm going to use as the inspiration for the watch model. And I'm going to kill my camera and then turn it back on. See,
a lot of people listen in. So yeah, sorry.
So the way my process works is I begin by choosing the place that I want to use as the inspiration for the watch, for the model line. And then I create separate dials that are like more specific areas or places within that area. So like this watch, the Pacific Coast Highway, is meant to be inspired and is inspired by the California coast. So the watches for Lōcī won't always be California inspired, but since this was our first model and I've been living within, a stone's throw of the PCH for like between San Francisco and LA now for 27 years or something, I thought I would keep it close to home for this first model line. So the brand overall, my intention is for it to be, fairly contemporary, fairly sporty, fairly design forward, design led. So these were some of the things that I gave myself in the brief to work on, inspired by the California coast, modern, or I shouldn't say modern, right? Not mid-century modern, but contemporary design language. And then I got started, and I started with designing the case first, and then started working on the dials. When I think about, and this will be the way I do all my future models, when I think about the place that is inspiring the model line, I'll choose these more specific either places or aspects of that place to inspire a set of different dials. So when you think about the California coast, it's hard not to think about the Pacific Coast Highway.
Yeah.
So having a dial inspired by the road made sense. And then the other things that the California coast is all about is the beach and the ocean, right? So that's what we have. We have a dial inspired by the road and the beach and the ocean, or 3 dials, each inspired by those things. And, this was really close to home for me. I mean, I've ridden my motorcycle up and down the entire length of the PCH from, well up in Northern California where it starts down to San Diego. I've done that ride. I don't even know how many times, hundreds and hundreds of miles on that. I've even sailed up and down the California coast, car trips up and down the PC. So like, this is a place that is kind of near and dear to my heart. And it was not easy, but it was natural to come up with some like creative expressions, inspired by that. Cause the coast is a place that has a lot of meaning for me. And the California coast is, this is an aspirational place for a lot of people, like you can mention the Pacific Coast Highway, you can mention the California coast, you can mention Big Sur or Monterey Bay to people who have never been here, but like they have a lot of them will have a picture in their mind of it. And there's people who grow up on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world who like, this is where the place that they want to come to. And there's a reason for that. Like the coast is beautiful. It's inspiring. It's like, if parts of it like Big Sur and the Lost Coast north of San Francisco, you're just on these cliffs, and you have an immediate sense that you're just like, you're standing on like the ragged edge of the continent, right? Like it just drops straight off into the ocean. It's not like the East Coast where I grew up, where it's a gradual.
Yeah.
So, it's this beautiful, dramatic place, that was easy to be inspired by. So that was kind of my process. And like any creative person, any watch designer you talk to, it's like, yeah, you have to kill your darlings, right? So, there were a lot more things that I loved and kind of wanted to do, and had to whittle it down to these 3 for the first go.
Wow. Pretty deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And, something that immediately comes to mind, I'm sure you probably heard this, but, like Apple, right? Apple vibes. Like Apple is a company that's based in California, and every single operating system is based on a different place in California. And anyways, I think you hit the nail on the head. And, people are more likely to fall in love with a place, than they are a product or something along the lines of that. Is very rare. But I'm curious, it seems like you kind of understand that, and what are some places, that I'm sure you probably have a list of places at this point that you're hoping to kind of capture
A really long one.
and to like bottle into a timepiece. Like give us a taste of some of the places that inspire you.
Well, I could go on for a really long time talking about places. I mean, I've been to 49 of the 50 states and 5 out of the 7 continents. And I don't know, I think I've been on 4 or 5 oceans and seas. So we could spend the rest of the day talking about the places. I mean, I think maybe I could frame it in terms of talking about it with watches, right? So like as an example, one of the designs I have on the drawing board is basically a skin diver, still using like a modern or a contemporary design aesthetic, like you see with the PCH, evolving a little bit more, like any good skin diver, kind of a mix of brushed and polished surfaces, keeping it as thin as possible, not maxing out the depth rating, but still respectable, like all these things. So like my idea is probably to call that model line, the Archipelago. And then I'll have dials that are each named after a specific island chain, right? I'm thinking about doing like a white dial and naming it after the Aleutians, right? The Aleutian Islands up in Alaska, which like I've done some traveling up there, and that's a place that totally awe-inspiring, right? And so that's kind of the idea of how the concept of the Lōcī's brand and capturing the spirit of place can scale through watch lines, right? Like I'll of course do a more standard sort of toolish diver with more depth rating, and I might call that one like the One Ocean, and then each dial variant can be named after a different ocean or sea, and I'll do something to try to capture the spirit or the color. Like for me, like when I look at a picture of an ocean, I can usually guess from the color of the water which ocean it is,
Oh,
maybe
wow.
about 75% of the time.
Nice.
So, I can't make a line full of blue watches, or sort of like shades of blue. But I'll find things that are specific and inspired by like that particular ocean, that particular sea. I can choose Caribbean and a nice bright color. I can choose Arctic and make a white dial, Arctic Sea, make a white dial, right? Arctic Ocean. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about scaling the idea through different model lines.
That's so
And
cool.
how it'll go beyond, just California.
Yeah. So funny story. I'm huge on geography because I think once you travel the world, like you learn that like there's so much diversity, not only through like language, through culture, through people, but just through, terrain, right?
Mm-hmm.
The landscape. And funny story. Is like I traveled and I lived in Europe for quite a while, but
Oh, cool.
I'm the guy that never pays for Wi-Fi on the airplane. So I was like, which app could I get that'll keep me entertained that I could literally play? I don't have to have Wi-Fi. And the app I think it's called GeoGuessr, right? So essentially what it does is it drops you in the middle of somewhere in the world on Google Maps, and you can do like a 360 pan of it, and then you have to guess where it is.
I'm literally writing this down because I want to try it.
I figured you'd appreciate it. I think it's called GeoGuessr.
I'll find it.
Yeah, but it's yeah, they always drop you someplace where it's like, there's a unique landscape, right? Where there's like street signs or like a city or a village. It's freaking cool. But I really enjoyed playing that game, which leads me to my next question. Obviously you talked about spending, quite a bit of time at Team Rubicon. I'm curious as to how that experience, changed the way that you think about the world, land, places, people, whatever.
The biggest way is something I kind of touched on a little bit already, which is it taught me and showed me firsthand, like how vulnerable and how at risk these places really are, so like, here's an example about the PCH, right? About the California coast. That's a beautiful place. People live here. People come here to vacation.
Yeah.
You could spend days on end just thinking about all the different ways that it's a beautiful and like wonderful place. Guess what? Like last year before the San Francisco wind-up show, I was hatching an idea to ride my motorcycle up from LA to ride right up to the show. And take pictures and kind of make a little travelogue about it along the way for the watch company. Well, guess what? There were huge storms 2 years ago. There were landslides along the PCH and it was closed and you couldn't ride the length of it from LA to San Francisco. Okay. So I ended up throwing all my stuff in the car, which made my life easier. I could throw all my gear for the trade show in the car and just drive up. I'm like, I'm going to do it next year, which was this year, right? So this year rolls around. I was even emailing with John Ferrer from Brew. He's also a motorcycle rider. And I'm like, John, here's my idea. Like fly out here, rent a bike. You and me will ride up from from LA to San Francisco for the Wind Up Watch show. He's never ridden or driven the PCH before. I'm like, it's going to be a life-changing experience. Well, guess what? February came along, huge rainstorms. The fires. Yeah. Well,
those are later.
Yeah. Huge rainstorms and again, landslides. You can't ride through one of the best parts of the PCH in Big Sur. And, what's driving this stuff is, natural disasters, right? It's huge storms, dumping so much rain. And then the wildfire, this is all stuff I learned at Team Rubicon, right? And I could go on about disaster the disaster cycle for a long time, but that's not really what we're here for. But these things, these different types of disasters actually compound one another. So when you have wildfires on the coast, like we just had here in LA in January, but they've happened before. We had big wildfires here on the coast 4 or 5 years ago as well. They burn all the trees off of the steep hills that line the coast of California. And when there's no trees on those steep hills, when it rains, the soil can't absorb the water the way it normally would. So now those steep hills with no trees on them are just like a giant water slide for the storms, which are now, much more intense and longer lasting and dump more water on the coast than they used to 10 and 20 years ago. Those storms dump all that water. The fires burn the hillsides dry, burn them clear. And now you end up with landslides all over the place. So these are some of the things, the PCH watch, the California coast, we've got the wildfires, we've got landslides, we've got coastal erosion, we've got water pollution, we've got air pollution to worry about. There's all kinds of unique marine and coastal habitats up and down the coast that are all at risk from those things. So this is the way that I see, one of the ways that I see places now. And that way of seeing places came to me through my experience working at Team Rubicon, and is central to the way that I built the brand and the way that I designed the brand's purpose.
Yeah, I mean, now that you put that perspective on us, I don't think a lot of people, I mean, we have a good audience in California, but a lot of people don't understand that. I mean, I'm in your backyard, right? I'm in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So, but just this week there was a wildfire in, I think it was somewhere in Santa Barbara or something.
Yeah,
something like that.
Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo area.
Yeah. And I wake up, just doing my normal thing. I have no idea what the hell's going on in the world. But then I'm like, why is it so smoky? Like I can't even see like the mountains. I can't even see like, 20 or 30 feet in front of me.
Yeah.
Right. And just so happens that the wind took all the smoke right here to Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't want to be, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it just goes right back to my point that, I mean, it seems like California is really the right place for what you do. And I guess in a good sense, but also in a terrible sense, because there's a lot of environmental, it seems like there's a lot of environmental disasters that happen in California. I mean, it seems like you guys are ground zero for that.
It's almost everywhere. I mean, when I started thinking about the brand and designing the brand, this was something I thought about, right? Like, I'm trying to think about how to say this without sounding like insensitive, but like, am I going to run out of places that are at risk and need to be protected? Am I going to run out of places that I could choose as the inspiration for watch design and find a nonprofit that works in that area? And, again, like thinking back to my experience working at Team Rubicon, it's like the answer is no, right? Like just about every place that you can think of has risk factors that people aren't thinking of. And like, I don't want to get on my soapbox and like bang on about all this stuff, but like, you choose any place you want on the eastern seaboard in the southeast, right? Well, there's hurricanes all the time. The entire western half of the country, you've got wildfires. Both coasts, you've got torrential rainstorms. In the mountains, you get snows that are now like causing floods and doing things up there. So like I guess I don't want people to go down this rabbit hole, and I don't want people to like have to think about it in a dark way, but I would love for Lōcī to be a vehicle or like an opening a little aperture for people to look through and just be able to think about when they see and appreciate someplace that they love, that they feel is beautiful or meaningful to them in some way, that they also just kind of like just have a moment and think about that place it's not certain that place is going to be there for your kid or your grandkid to experience the way you're experiencing it now. Yeah. And that I think there's an opportunity for all of us to have a hand in protecting and preserving those places. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we want them to be there, for our kids and our grandkids to enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from the East Coast as well, from North Carolina, so I can't even tell you how many hurricanes and tornadoes I've lived through,
a lot of time down there.
and flooding and yeah, I mean, especially now, like my brother was in the flooding in Western North Carolina, but he lives in Tennessee, and his entire town was wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
and he had a newborn baby. Like it was crazy, like just crazy. And yeah, I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, I mean, who knows in 100 years, or I don't even know, but who knows if Miami will still exist? You know,
Yeah, it doesn't look good.
because of the sea level rising.
Yeah, it looks like it'll be a good scuba diving spot.
I'm curious, you know, is there a single disaster zone or maybe a location that kind of stuck with you that, you know, I think maybe has helped you kind of shaped Lōcī into what it is now, or maybe the mission?
It's really hard to choose a single one. I'll say that something that struck me and stayed with me on like the very first disaster operation I ever deployed on. So I was a staffer. I worked at Team Rubicon's headquarters office here in Los Angeles.
Mm.
So I spent most of my time in the office, and my job and the marketing communications team's job was to do a couple of things. One was to help the organization raise money so that we could turn it into impact downrange for communities who needed that help.
Nice.
And, you know, another thing was to build the brand and build awareness for the brand, to help drive donations and to build partnerships with big corporations on a marketing and branding basis. So like that was my team's function, but we all deployed, you know, everybody who worked at headquarters always deployed on operations because it was important for us to see and experience that stuff firsthand. So like the first one I ever went to was a tornado in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. This would have been like, it was 2016 in November, like mid-November. And like, this is not where I'm wanting to take the story, but it was right after the election, the 2016 election. And I'm like, you know, I'm this guy from LA, right? You know, coastal city, LA, you know, parachuting into Hattiesburg, Mississippi, which is, you know, a whole nother world culturally down there.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit wondering, like, what's this going to be like? Because the whole country was just kind of charged with this latent energy, you know, from the political sphere. Everything was just kind of like, it felt like everything was charged. And I'm like, what's it going to be like when I go down there? And what it was like was, you know, so I linked up with a team of Team Rubicon volunteers, and we worked I was there for a week, but the operation was up for months. And when a tornado hits a town, it's just like, I'm sure you've seen pictures and videos, but like, you know, it just leaves a pile of sticks where a house used to be, or a church, or a school. So our job was what we did was we found what were the most socially vulnerable areas of the whole area that was hit by the disaster. So we would find the places where the people were the most vulnerable. They had the lowest rates of home insurance, lowest rates of income, lowest rates of health insurance, and things like that. Those are the people we would go and help, right? Like, we'd help the people with the $1 million house, but they'd be last in line. Because if we could go and do all this demolition and clearing work, right, go to their destroyed house and take all that debris away, that would cost them $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 to have that done. And if we come and show up and do that for free, that can make the difference for that family between having nowhere to go and being homeless for the long run to being able to actually start over again. So I got down there, and what I found was that nobody said a word about what was going on in the outside world. Everybody was focused on the mission. It just wasn't talked about. Everybody talked about the mission, what brought us all together. A lot of us were veterans, and we had that to bond over, right? Like I mentioned before. And all we did was focus on the mission and you know, kind of share our own personal backstories with one another around the campfire at night after the day's work was done. And that experience of like seeing how bringing people together around a mission can just shut out all of the noise in the world, even when it's incredibly intense. Like, that was one of the things that will always stay with me. And it's tied to Hattiesburg because that tornado, just because that happened to be the first time I experienced that. But that was the same thing that happened over and over again, every place I went. And so I think that's one of the things that's core to the brand, right? Like, this is a way everybody has the opportunity, or everybody has the potential to love a place like the California coast or the Hawaiian Islands or the Mojave Desert. Everybody could connect in with those places in a meaningful way, and everybody can rally around the cause of wanting to protect them. And this, like, brands with a mission can bring people together like that and shut out all of that noise that's in the outside world. And it's like, look, if we can be a tiny part of the solution to those two really big problems, right? The vulnerability of places and the kind of noise of what's separating people out there. If we could be a tiny, tiny part of the solution to those problems, like I'm all for it. Like that's the bet I took on myself when I started the brand.
Yeah, I mean that's an amazing story, an amazing accomplishment, and I don't think people understand like how. I'm sure people don't appreciate what you're doing just quite yet. Maybe they do, but
I'm working on it. You're helping.
Thank you. So, you also, we've talked about this, but you donate 10%, like just right off the top, into nonprofits, that are protecting, endangered places. I'm sure you probably in your mind, either consciously or subconsciously, have like a vetting process as to how you choose those partners, choose those nonprofits, like, or maybe by how much impact they can make in the world or something like that. I'm curious as to what trip Henderson is thinking about when you select those places.
I put a lot of thought into this. Having been on the inside of that world, I have a very clear idea of, what, first of all, like at the top line, a nonprofit is, the whole purpose of a nonprofit is basically to turn money into impact in the world against whatever their mission is. That's what a nonprofit is for. People think about for-profit, people sometimes ask me, what was it like going from working for for-profit companies to going to nonprofit companies? I'm like, it's the same exact thing, except in a private company, all you're thinking about is profit. And in a nonprofit, there's another step. You have to bring in the revenue in the form of donations and grants and things like that. But then your job is to turn that money into impact. So the best nonprofits are just extremely efficient machines at turning the money that people give them and entrust to them in the form of donations, turning that money into impact downrange against whatever their mission is, whether it be disaster relief like TR or Surfrider Foundation, who I donate 10% of the PCH watch sales to. They're all about protecting the environment, coastal and ocean environments. So when you look at nonprofits, there's a lot that you can do to understand. There are some really, really good, really thorough organizations that all they do is vet and give ratings to nonprofits. You're looking at things like what's their overhead rates, or what percentage of the donations that go to a particular nonprofit, how much of that goes to their overhead and how much of it goes to operations. So, a nonprofit needs to pay its staff just like any other place. But if you find, you're looking for places that are renting like penthouse office space in New York City, like, do you need that?
Yeah.
If you go to their website, is the first thing you see a picture of a bunch of people partying at their annual fundraiser gala? Maybe they're not as serious about their mission as, you'd like them to be. So, there are ways to kind of look at who their executives are, look at how they shine the light on their volunteers in the field, right? Are they doing a good job telling the stories, not about themselves, shining a light on the organization, but shining the light on the people who do the real work, their volunteers usually, and the communities that they support? When nonprofits are spending a lot of time talking about those things and not talking about themselves and not talking about their, celebrity fundraiser galas, like these are all good signs that can tell you that you're looking at a good, solid organization. And then you can pull up, like, every nonprofit in the US anyway has to release certain forms every year. There's something that the IRS calls a 990 form, which is basically a financial overview of the organization. It has to list out all the income that they took in from donations and in-kind donations. Like, for instance, Microsoft was a big partner of TR, and they gave us a crap ton of seat licenses for MS Office, and they gave us Surface tablet screens to put on the wall and things. So tallies up all of that stuff, and then you see, where the money got spent and how much of it went to their operations. It lists out like how much their top executives make. It lists out the top external partners, like say consultants or people like that the organization paid money to. Like, you can look through that 990 and see, like, are they paying their CEO $5 million? Like, this isn't a serious organization, right? Like, that money, every dollar you spend on a salary is a dollar you're not using to make impact for your mission. So, these are, you dig into their 990 forms, dig into their annual reports. Like, these are kind of all things I do. And then for Lōcī specifically, I'm looking for organizations that are mission aligned. So, I'm going to be choosing to support organizations that are connected to the locations that inspire the watch lines, right? So That's why Surfrider was such an easy choice for the Pacific Coast Highway Watch, right? Surfrider's based here in Los Angeles area. They're a global organization, but a lot of what they do is focused on everything they do is focused on coastal environments, and a lot of it is here in California. If I make that skin diver watch I talked about and I call it the Archipelago, I'll be looking for a different nonprofit that focuses on, let's say, littoral marine environments, maybe something that works to preserve coral reefs or things like that. When I do a diver watch, I'll be looking for like a blue ocean nonprofit where their mission aligns with that place. So that's a lot of the thought process that goes into like how I choose which nonprofit to team up with.
It's super cool. And I thought about this before jumping on the podcast, but a lot of people are ignorant. So there's a lot of people that donate, right? Like Red Cross or, Salvation Army. I mean, that's a very common donation portal, right? But there's not a lot of, I don't think, at least in my opinion, I think ignorance, a lot of us are ignorant to like the back curtain, right? Like I've heard of issues, right? And I'm not going to say the nonprofit, but I used to work at a company. We partnered with a nonprofit, and every holiday that was appropriate to donate to them, we would donate. We would do an event around it, and we would donate to them, right? But then I started hearing oh, well, there's been some I guess some issues, right? Like that they're keeping 70% of the donations, or they're buying houses and in jets and cars and Rolexes and all this all this shit with it. So I think as time has went on, people have their trust in nonprofits has maybe gotten smaller, or maybe people just don't understand, and myself included, like, don't understand how to research those nonprofits. And you just kind of hit the nail on the head there.
If you want to shortcut it, go to Charity Navigator, or go to Charity Watchdog, and they do evaluations and give basically star ratings for the nonprofits, and they summarize like a 1-page on their website summary of each nonprofit. And
amazing.
Yeah. So find yourself, if Charity Watchdog or Charity Navigator or GuideStar also is a good one. If one of those or all of those are giving your charity a top rating, like, you can feel good about donating the money. And I think it's easy to paint with a really broad brush about nonprofits. There's a lot of people talking smack about, these are people who are siphoning off money and they're lazy and inefficient and bureaucratic. And sure, there's examples that are like that. But those are the exceptions and not the rule. And I could tell you stories about working at Team Rubicon. I mean, when I've never worked any place, maybe except for the Navy, where people were so dedicated to the work and the mission. And when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, that kicked off, again, this from the perspective of a guy working in the headquarters office in LA. That was the biggest operation that the organization ever launched. And we sent 3,000 volunteers over the course of months and months down to Houston. And I could go on and on about the work they did, but what it felt like in LA at the office was, 60 to 90 days of 12 to 14 to 15 to 16-hour days, people sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags under their desks, not going home on weekends. And it wasn't because nobody was doing that because we were trying to make a shitload of money for ourselves. We were all doing that because the work that we were doing was helping people who needed to be helped. So I want people to have that perspective on the nonprofit world too. There are a lot of really good, really motivated, really skilled, dedicated people doing really difficult work. So it's important to keep an eye on that. And it hits the watch world. There was that, what's the big nonprofit watch auction that they did in Europe for Only Watch? Only Watch. Do you remember that thing?
There's been so much controversy around it.
Yeah.
It's hard to point back to a specific controversial event, but no, please elaborate.
What I know from working at a nonprofit is nonprofits function on trust. When people like you and me and our moms and grandmoms give money to a nonprofit, they have to trust the nonprofit is going to do what they're supposed to do with the money. And without that, you can't have impact without donations, and you can't have donations without trust, and you can't have trust without transparency. And like in the watch world, there's a lot of hand waving and gala partying and auctioning off of, very high price widgets to very wealthy people, that gets kind of painted with the brush of like it's for philanthropy, and sometimes it is, and sometimes like that only watch auction was like, I kind of dug into that because I was fired up about it, right? Like I come from this world, and I don't like to see a lack of transparency causing people to have the kind of doubts you're talking about, right? And like that was a weird situation. Like it could have never happened here in the US because of the way that it's regulated here. And I don't know how nonprofits are regulated in Monaco, but you had a situation where the person, this was based on what I could find out from publicly available information. And if there's anything that I'm wrong about, like that's on me. And I apologize for that in advance. But like my understanding of that situation was like the person running that auction and making all of the money had raised up to something like $100 million over the course of however long that auction had been running. But 55 million of it was just still sitting in their bank account. And most of it was flowing to the purpose of that nonprofit was to help find a cure for muscular dystrophy, I think was the disease. The guy's son was afflicted with the disease. So they're on the surface level, it all looks great. But then they were taking that money that they were getting from the auctions, people buying these watches at the auctions. Half of it was just sitting there unused, and 80 or 85% of the half that had gone out of the nonprofit organization, most of that was given to a biotech company that the guy who started the auction was a board director and part owner of. So they were basically using the auction as a fundraising vehicle. Like if you go to a venture capitalist and say, I need $50 million to invest in my biotech, like you're going to have hammer out a term sheet. They're going to want their piece. They're going to hold you accountable to the progress of the company. And this was just like, and so there's effectively like an interest rate on that money that you take. You have to give away part of your company to get the VC money. And this was like a free way to raise money as a nonprofit and then funnel it to your biotech company that you partly own. Right. And by the way, like the other 50 million sitting in the bank that hasn't been invested, like if you're a nonprofit and you're not spending the money that people gave you on your mission, like you have a fiduciary duty to them. They gave you that money not so it could sit in your bank account. They gave you that money so that you could do what you're supposed to do with it. And I can tell you, man, $50 million, like when I started at Team Rubicon in 2016, we were about a $14 million a year organization. And when I left 4 years later, we were running about $47 or $50 million a year. Like that's the entire budget of TR that was running hundreds of disaster relief operations a year on $50 million. So like they're just sitting on that money and it's doing nothing. So I got pretty, sorry, this turned into a big tangential soapbox, but I got pretty fired up about that. And I think that the watch world needs to do better. They need to do better than, we need to do better than 1% for the planet. We need to do better than an undisclosed portion of the proceeds of some small limited run of watches from a multi-billion-dollar company, kind of being given to some nonprofit. And like, that's the last you hear about it. Like, transparency is the only way all of this works. And so I'm kind of, I get fired up about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think our mission's aligned. Like a lot of people, at least when I started like my project, right, whatever you want to call it, Lonely Wrist, we're not a nonprofit, but we don't take any funding from watch brands. Like obviously you haven't paid me any money, and if you did, I don't know where it went, but anyways, it's more about transparency. Right. Like I want people to understand that there needs to be a transparent watch industry, and there hasn't been for as long as I have been in watches. I haven't seen anything like that. And a lot of the content creators out there, not to throw shame or shade, but they're profiting off the media they produce and they're profiting off the product they sell. Right. So it's like they have a full circle profit margin. And I started thinking back, I was like, how many creators are there out there that don't sell watches, and then they're only talking about the shit they sell, and like, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread, but you can buy it from my shop, and it's like, all right, guy, like, I get it. I see what you're doing, and so you're starting to see I mean, especially with some of the bigger media outlets that have been, ousted for that exact reason, you're starting to see kind of a new shift in media culture, not even necessarily in the watch industry, but just in the world. You're starting to see a rise in independent outlets. People are going away from mainstream media, because they just want to go straight to information, right? And it's hard for me to make an impact, I guess, necessarily in the watch industry, but no, I want to be like an informational resource. And a lot of the mission started with that, just being transparent and then helping to lower the bar, because I think this is a really rewarding hobby. I hope that more people see that. And I hope that more people understand that watches are, not only little devices that, you tell time from, but they're engineering marvels. There's passion put into every single watch that I think I've ever purchased or owned, or there's so many brands out there that think like you do that are so freaking passionate about, the industry, the community, and giving back and using, watches as a little time machine, and I think it's just so cool, because there's not a lot of objects out there that really kind of are rooted in history that you use, right? Like, I mean, we all have iPhones, right? Like, how much history is in an iPhone, right? There's not hundreds of years of history in iPhones, there's decades of technology that it's progressed, but, something that, 30, 50, 60, 70, 100 years, hopefully my watches are still ticking. I hope so. But I think a lot about that. And it's cool to hear, somebody that has a different story and different perspective on the watch industry. And, let's use this as a segue, but I had a guest on yesterday. And he talked about, you'll know by the time yours goes live, because I'm sure you'll have heard his mission. But he talked about jumping into the watch industry by just seeing the passion people, like when you find a watch that you love or you connect with, it's like a flame, or I mean, you don't even understand. Maybe some people do. If you're listening to my podcast, you understand the feeling that you love something so much and it suits your lifestyle in such a way. So the reason why I'm saying this is because he brought this out, right? He talked a lot about this. Well, when somebody tries on one of my watches, I want them to think about this, right? And then I was thinking, why have I never asked that question? So you're going to be my guinea pig. When somebody puts on a Lōcī watch, what do you want somebody to feel?
I've put a fair amount of thought into this. I mean, I think that first and foremost, I want it to connect them to the place that inspired the watch. I want them to somehow, even if it's a place they've never been to, or if it's a place they have been to, it reminds them of that place. But the creative core of the brand is around capturing that spirit of place, and letting people experience that in some way when they look at the watch and wear the watch. So that's the first thing. And if I want people to experience the design of the watch. I want them to feel like you were talking about iPhones and watches, right? And nobody loves their iPhone, right? The utility of the thing is off the scale, but there's no beauty and there's no passion in it. So when people have a Lōcī watch, I want them to somehow see or feel and experience that passion and the beauty of the design. And I want them to attach to the design of the object. And then the last thing, which I don't know if everybody will feel this, but I think that, like I said earlier in the podcast, if this brand is going to succeed, it's going to succeed because we find people who want to be part of the mission. And so I think for the subset of people, there's going to be people who buy the watch because they love the watch as an object, just as a watch, and that's great. And then there's going to be a different subset of people who are buying the watch because they want to be part of that mission. And so I want those folks to feel like they've done a little tiny bit to help, right? They've made it a little tiny difference against a huge set of problems out in the world. And it's we're just a small watch brand and you may only be just one customer. But here's an opportunity for you as a buyer to wear the watch and feel like you've had an impact in the world instead of wearing something and just feeling like, well, my money went into somebody's pocket, or me wearing this is going to impress somebody or show status. I want people to feel like they've been able to kind of express their own values and have an impact by wearing the watch.
Beyond telling your customers like, hey, 10% of the profits go, or the proceeds go to this charity, like how do you make your customers feel proud about that? And so it brings the question, because I'm working with a brand, and they're a heritage brand, like one of the earlier Swiss watch brands, the first brands to do in-house. I'm just going to go ahead and say it is Zenith. I've been working with Zenith a lot. I think people know, at this point, I'm a shill, not a non-paid shill. But no, I'm just so passionate about, their story, right? The products. And the only reason I'm saying this on your specific podcast is, one of my friends sold their watches, and, she had reached a certain sales goal, right? And they bought a star and named the star after
That's
her
awesome.
son, right? And so, and it was this nonprofit, right, that they purchased the star from, or some I don't know, that goes towards, I don't know what it goes towards, but and so I could only imagine in that moment, right, for her, right, that she was like, wow, this is like tangible, this is real, like I did something that is worthy of being honored beyond the purchase, right? So goes back to you, Mr. Marketing Guy. How do you make people feel the impact of, buying a Lōcī watch, and how do you take your nonprofits goals and objectives, and you talked a lot about shit, I can't think of the exact word that you use, but impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make your customers feel the impact that these nonprofits are doing?
This is something I actually need to do a better job of. Because I'm very selective in how I choose nonprofits, like one of the other metrics I use to evaluate them is how transparent are they and how much information do they share about the impact that they're making in the world. And the gap that I need to close is I need to do a better job kind of sharing that impact with Lōcī's customers. Including things like that in, email newsletters that I send out, or baking them into the website. There's ways to do this that I'm just a little bit time limited on, and like haven't been able to get to yet. So it's something I've put it's a good question. It's the right question. It's something I put a lot of thought into, and I have some ideas on how to execute on it. For now, I'm providing transparency by posting my donation receipts on my website. So when we talk about, our watch brands being as transparent as they could be about the donations they make, I'm putting it all out there. Twice a year I make the donations and I post that receipt on the website. But that's not interesting or exciting or inspiring for any customers to interact with. That's just me following through on a commitment to transparency. So what I'd like to do more of in the future is making sure that, and the good nonprofits, the kind of nonprofits that I team up with, are putting out that information constantly, stories of their impact, stories of their volunteers, working on the front lines of their mission, things like that. So that stuff is there for me to access and share with Lōcī's customers. And I need to make a little bit of space to make that happen more often, because it's important, right? People, this was something we worked really hard at Team Rubicon, was just making sure people had a really clear picture of what impact their money was driving on both a quantitative, like, hey, this is how many volunteers we deployed. This is how many hours they put in of free labor to help impacted communities. This is, all kinds of things like that. And then like the more emotional side of like creating videos of our volunteers and of the community, people in the communities that we were helping, and sharing those. Like, people who donate to nonprofits, they want and need to see that, to sort of close the loop, or to get some closure, to see the ultimate end of like the donations they make. So I've got a little work to do there, but the material's all there because the nonprofits I work with put it out there. Yeah. And it's on me to dig in and share it more actively with my customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I think, and I alluded to this earlier in the podcast, but I donate as much as I can, when I can, whether through time or through money. But I always want to feel like I want to see the outcome, right? It's like you're planting a seed, right? You want to see that seed grow into whatever the seed was. In my case, I was huge. I love to grow peppers, jalapenos, serrano, habanero. So man, I
I
can't
didn't
tell
know
you.
this about you, Blake.
Yeah. No, I don't talk about it too much, but I had a garden in North Carolina, and I would grow a lot of my own food and then come out. I had chickens, I had all the fun stuff. But there's no more rewarding part than starting off with just seeing nothing but dirt. You plant the seed, you nurture it right into something that you put back into your body, or it's a crazy full circle moment. So the only reason, again, why I'm bringing this is not to call you out in your vulnerabilities or your lack of communicating that, but something that I would enjoy as a Lōcī customer is just seeing the impact, feeling it. Not everybody can get out there and go pick up, tornado debris, right? Not everybody can do that, right? Or has the means or resources to do that, but they're $20, $50, $100 or whatever. They still want to feel like that they helped in some way. So
yeah, for Lōcī's customers, I mean, they're one step away, right? So they can always go to Surfrider Foundation's website.
Yeah.
Their whole marketing communications team, just like the team I worked on at TR, is constantly putting out that kind of material. For me, it's an issue. It's the challenge is, okay, I need to actually push that out to my customers so that they see that. So it's kind of like, I love hearing about things that I need to be doing better. And I love to hear questions like, hey, why aren't you doing this? Or why are you doing this? So it's all taken in the spirit of like, okay, it's something that I can build on and a way for the brand to improve. So I appreciate it. It's just like when somebody puts on a watch and says, oh, it's great to hear people say, I love the watch. It's, it's this and that, but I can't learn anything. I can't improve the watch until they start telling me the things that they feel are weak points or things that they would change. So it's all about kind of like running toward the criticism instead of away from it.
Yeah. Final question. And so we don't talk too much about legacy, right? Independence, watch brands such as yourself, impact brands is what you're branding yourself as. I'm sure it seems like you've thought about a lot of this stuff, which is amazing. What legacy do you hope Lōcī leaves, not just as a brand, but as an impact brand? Like how are you going to preserve this beyond your days?
I mean, the legacy is in the continued access to the places that the watches are inspired by and the places that we support with donations. Now that's a grandiose thing to say, right? Like we're such a small brand that impact, unless someday we become wildly successful, and hopefully that day comes, but that impact will be tiny. But that's a very real way that I'm thinking about the legacy of the brand is on the places that we're trying to protect. I think in other ways, I think I want the legacy to be in the way that people get to be part of that mission and people get to have a role in protecting and preserving those places. I want people to have the opportunity to be a part of that. So the legacy is kind of the way that we empower, because it's not about Lōcī. It's not about the impact we are having. It's actually the customers are having the impact.
Right.
And so the legacy is in, that little spark of inspiration and passion and commitment that the customers make when they buy one of our watches, and do a little something to protect the place that inspired it.
I have a couple more questions here that I figured I might slip in.
Yeah,
so you talked a lot about location. So, and maybe you won't want to answer this, but I'm sure there's a place out there that kind of like recharges you. Like, hey, I can just put my phone away. I can just literally go back and recharge the batteries. What is that place?
Yeah, there's like, we live less than a mile from the beach. And I'm actually not a big beach person, but I'm an ocean person. So I love to spend time in the water. I'm not a surfer yet, but I've been a swimmer my whole life. I used to be like a competitive swimmer when I was a kid. So I spent a lot of time in the ocean, and for me and now that I'm taking my daughter, like she's getting big enough and old enough and strong enough swimmer that like she can come out into the waves with me and stuff. So like that's when we'll go down there and just spend, even a half an hour, but hopefully more. Spend a half an hour in the ocean. Like that gets me fired up. I mentioned I'm a motorcycle rider, like spending an hour or a day or a week on the bike. I spent 2 months on my bike and 11,000 miles around the US once, like maybe
So cool.
the United States. But time on the bike, not in traffic, but like on roads that are enjoyable. That recharges me. I mentioned I'm a skier, spending time and a backpacker. So like, especially when I lived up in San Francisco, I spent a lot more time up in the mountains around Tahoe and Desolation Wilderness and places like that, backpacking and skiing. Like those places recharge me. So there's a lot. Sailing. I don't do as much sailing as I used to, but time spent on the water sailing, like I used to do a lot of racing, but also like cruising, sailing. Like it's all these things that I think the key is like, it takes your mind off of everything else. This is not a revelation. A lot of people talk about this kind of thing, but when you're doing something that requires you to focus on it, and that it takes all of your sort of consciousness and focus away from everything else in your life and pours it into like an activity in a beautiful place that makes that activity possible. Like those are all things that kind of get me fired up and recharge me. And traveling, going someplace I haven't been before. If I haven't been there before, then I'm interested. Like that's my rule about travel. Like, do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? I'm like, if I haven't been there, then yeah, I want to go. So traveling someplace new is also another one.
If you could, and this will be my final question, I think we're going to leave it on a super high note, but if you could collaborate with any nonprofit organization, whoever in the world, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a great question.
I save the hard ones for the end. The people that make it this far, we got to give them an Easter egg, man.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot, or there are a lot of possibilities, I think. And a lot of these might not be possible because they're like, some of them are already partnered with watch brands, but just as a blue sky question, you're asking it like if it was possible. Like I think the Oceana is a nonprofit that does a lot of work in the deep ocean, like blue ocean. And what I like about what they do is they drive and fund a lot of scientific and deep ocean engineering research, in addition to like preservation of habitats. So there's a practical, that money that they invest in research and scientific development is driving future, is making certain types of preservation activities possible. So like, I like that they have that kind of 1-2 punch of like, yes, we're rehabilitating these environments, but we're also like helping create technology or helping drive scientific research that helps us even understand what's happening in these places. Like, I think that that's a really cool approach that they have. So that's one that's kind of at the top of my list, but there's a lot of others.
Wow. Epic. We spent quite a lot of time talking not only about watches, but philanthropy, Lōcī, how you kind of wrap this all together. It's been an amazing journey. I can't wait for this one to go live just to hear all the chatter, right? I get a lot of DMs. And I just want to thank
you. We didn't even talk about watches all that much. I hope people aren't disappointed.
So I've talked about this, but we're a watch centric podcast, but we talk a lot about entrepreneurship, creative development, and we wrap it all with watches, right? So, just to hear the whole Lōcī, like mission impact, you talked a lot about watch design and inspirational design, and I think your perspective is probably just is not, if not more interesting than the watches, in my opinion. So, and I hope that everybody agrees, right? I hope that I have no roadmap for this, right? This is just all fun and so yeah, I think it'll be well received for sure.
Right.
And everybody who is listening, if you enjoyed this type of podcast, so I started talking to some, and I'm sure probably like, since you're a marketing guy, I don't tell people enough that they need to go rate my podcast. Like, we're number 6 watch podcast in the world. Crazy stat, but
you put in the work.
We only have like a handful of like reviews. So I want to,
everybody please rate and review the Lonely Wrist podcast. I'll plug it for you.
I know I hate to shill my own shit, but no, to me, and I've talked about this, this is an outlet, this is a platform. I'm just a custodian of it, right? It's for the community. It's for, transparency. It's for passion. I talked a lot, I asked you about how you bottle, your, that energy, right? This is how I bottle it. This is how I bottle my passion, and this is how I share it. For no other reason does Lonely Risk exist, for that whole sole purpose. So thank you for helping me accomplish my passion and preserve it. And hopefully I can do the same for you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm sure your listeners and watchers, viewers, I'm sure they realize that, part of the beauty of what you're doing in creating this platform is making it possible for brands like Lōcī and all the other awesome startup watch brands out there, independent watch brands out there, to reach people with their story and talk about the brand and talk about the products, the watches. None of us, well, I'll just speak for myself. I can't afford what it would take to go out there and reach hundreds of thousands and millions of watch fans, right? It's people like you and the platforms that you build based on your passion to build a media platform that makes it possible for, at least gives a shot to brands like Lōcī to find success. So I think it's a great mission to be on. And like the watch industry, especially the independent and the startup watch industry, we need folks like you doing what you're doing, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure that your fans do as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully they'll drop you that review.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll start to see them trickle in. But no, I've thought really hard about this too. There's no clear path, right? Like, we can sit here and plan for the future all that we want, but you're one turn away from a whole new mission, a whole new perspective, a whole new goal, a whole new objective. And there's no amount of planning that can help me kind of do what I'm doing, right? There's no guidebook for, how to start a media company, or how to make an impact in media, right? It's all feeling based. It's all, just like hopefully throw the line in the water and catch a fish. And consciously, like, some people have even brought to my attention that I have to do one of two things. And one of that is either stick with brands like yours, right, where we can make an impact together, or I can go up market and get the big boys and do all this and start, shilling for them or whatever. And I hope that I haven't made that choice, and I hope I don't ever have to. But yeah. So hopefully I can kind of stay where I'm at. And I also like the fact that my podcast is much bigger than the rest of my outlets. The website's gets a lot of traffic, but I'm just starting out on YouTube, and hopefully there we can reach a different audience. And I'm not a big like megalophone guy. Like, I don't like to toot my own horn. I really don't even post my own content on my own channels, because I feel like if people find me and they learn about, what we're doing, then there's going to be a longer or a more stronger connection, I think, with our audience, right? So I'm making it harder on myself, possibly by walking up the mountain with the heaviest backpack he ever got, but I think it's more interesting, right? I think it's a more interesting approach to a traditional media outlet, if that's what you want to call me. But
you seem pretty happy doing it the way you're doing it. I don't hear a lot of angst in your voice when you're talking about it. So,
no.
You talked about, I'm not making these plans and stuff. Like, look, people sitting around making elaborate plans are usually outpaced by people just doing the thing. So
yeah,
just keep doing what you're doing. Maybe you're on the right road.
I hope so. And yeah, there's only passion behind it. There's nothing else that's fueling this. There's no money behind it. There's nothing else. It's just passion. So and I've even had those discussions, like, like, how do we continue to preserve this? Because at the end of the day, like, money keeps the lights on, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do we do what you're doing, in a way? How do we preserve, the passion and keep the lights on at the same time? That's something I haven't figured out yet. But
well, don't quit your cybersecurity day job yet, man.
I know it pays for all this. So yeah. But anyways, Trip, thank you so much. I can't wait for this one to go live and to hear all the feedback. And And thanks for spending time with me. Thanks for reaching out. And thanks for sending me a little Pacific Coast Highway on my wrist.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on the show. I mean, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and reach your fans and hopefully raise awareness for the brand a little bit. So I owe you on the next time you're in LA, dinner's on me for sure.
Yep. I'll take you up on that. Everybody, please go check out Trip's brand, Lōcī. We are going to make sure we link them here in the description. Obviously, you didn't hear it from me, but there's a really interesting story behind this brand. I can only speak for them having great products and having a great founder and a great mission at this point. I understand it now, but they really have something special. As a watch aficionado, it doesn't take much time to understand that they have a great product and a great mission. So everybody go check them out. And until next time, we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks. Cheers, Blake.